Today we're flying Finnair on their now much longer routing from Helsinki to Tokyo. Why longer? Because they can't fly through Russian airspace anymore. That's made for some operational challenges to be sure, but Finnair is attempting to make the best of it. So join me to see how the Tokyo flight is at almost 13 hours in length, about 4 hours more than it used to be. Luckily, we're doing it in the comfort of Finnair's brand new business class on the A350, and I'll show you the sauna at Finnair's Platinum Wing Lounge in Helsinki as well. But first, I need to get from Stockholm to Helsinki, so here's that 35-minute flight on the Embraer 190 condensed into a few seconds. We're in the Platinum Wing Lounge that Finnair has here. It's different from the business class lounge. This one is the higher level one, and it has a kind of real dining setup. The food looks amazing down there. And this is the sauna, which has a men's dressing room over here, and then a women's dressing room on the other side, and there's a shared so-called cooling room, and then a sauna that everyone uses. At the moment, I'm the only one in here. Extra nice and fun detail was that the lady helping out at the bar also shows you in here, and she brings in a little bucket of drinks on ice, sodas and beer, fun stuff. Let me just say that having a sauna in a lounge in an airport is just the most amazing thing. Taking a moment out of your travel day, relaxing, especially if you've come in here from a long haul, I don't think you can beat that. And it's such a nice, unique thing that Finnair does. So bravo to them. They have been really good for a long time at offering these kind of really unique, really Finnish perks, things that you look forward to when you're flying them. And this lounge really is gorgeous, though I do find myself wishing there were more windows looking out onto the tarmac. Anyway, let's get over to the gate and finally fly to Tokyo after nearly 3 years of not being able to. It's going to be nearly 13 hours in the air today, flying south first to avoid Russia and Ukraine, before turning eastward and making the long trek across Central Asia and China. But I'll get more into some info about the routing and tell you a little bit about what our data says about these flights after the always satisfying A350 takeoff.
We are just about ready to start our engines. We will depart in scheduled time. Flight time today about 12 hours and 55 minutes, and that should bring us to Tokyo Haneda Airport at latest in scheduled time. More about the destination weather and estimated time of travel once we are a bit closer to destination. I wish you all a pleasant stay.
Thank you. Cabin crew ready for safety demonstration. Hello everyone. We're happy to welcome you on board Finnair. Before departure, we kindly ask you to pull the life jacket over your head. Fasten the front buckle.
Crew, prepare for takeoff.
Here's a less appreciated complication of the new routings to Asia. Look at how narrow the gap is here between Belarus and Kaliningrad, which is part of Russia. So we went in and crunched the numbers from some of the data we collected tracking all these flights. And we looked at the Helsinki to Tokyo route specifically, and we found that on average, before the Ukraine war, these flights from Helsinki to Tokyo were an average of 9 hours on the dot. And that's a nice short flight to get to Japan from Europe. Since the Ukraine war, the average has been 12 hours and 36 minutes. And it looks like today's flight is going to be even longer than the average, closer to 12 hours, 50 minutes, almost 13 hours. We're talking about a 35%, maybe 40% increase in flight time in some cases, which is, of course, significant for everyone involved in terms of the aircraft, fuel costs, etc. Now, one interesting thing about this flight is that because of Helsinki's position on the globe, it can make sense in some cases to take the polar route going to Tokyo instead of the southern route to the west of Ukraine, over Turkey, usually Kazakhstan, China, South Korea, and into Japan. But mostly the Helsinki to Tokyo, the eastbound flights, have taken the southern route. And we looked at the past month, and the southern route has been taken 26 times on Helsinki to Tokyo, whereas the polar route has been taken just 5 times. Now on the way back, because of winds, you can imagine there's mostly headwinds taking that southern route back. They seem to be favoring the polar route, where that's not as much of a factor. The southern route is, of course, quite a bit longer in distance than the polar route, but going east, you have those tailwinds. So that's something that they have to look at every day to make the decision, which one is preferable. But it seems clearly that the eastbound flights mostly do the southern route. And it's funny because right now we've taken off and headed kind of towards Riga, southwest out of Helsinki, more or less the opposite direction of what you would have taken in the old days, flying from Helsinki straight out east, entering Russian airspace and pretty much staying within it most of the roughly 9-hour flight over Siberia. Meanwhile, I can really recommend the Japanese-inspired dishes on Finnair's flights to Tokyo. This one was just the right size and very tasty too. And there's this Northern Blush canned cocktail to go with it. You may recall these from my last round trip in the new Finnair business class on the A330 to and from JFK. Here's the link up top in case you missed it. And if you've been watching these videos for a while, you'll know I don't often get into a lot of the in-flight entertainment, but you'll be pleased to know Finnair does have the only movie you really need on a flight to Tokyo. As before, I find these seats nice and comfortable for lounging, plus they're lovely looking. The cabin feels quiet, cozy, and spacious. And the A350 is that much more comfortable and quiet, not to mention wide, compared to the A330. Just a few hours into this marathon of a flight now. It's rare that I take such a long flight these days. 13 hours feels very long indeed. And we've only just kind of started facing in the right direction to get towards Tokyo. It's really quite nice when they turn the lights down and you want to relax or even sleep. It's very pleasant, and as always on the A350, very quiet as well, to such an extent that I feel a bit guilty for speaking to camera right now. So I think I'm going to try and get a bit of sleep, see if it works. So this is the second time I've done an overnight in one of these new Finnair business class seats, and once again, I slept so well. It's not immediately obvious when you lie down in it that it's going to be so incredible for sleeping, but somehow it just lets you get to sleep for several hours, which for me is rare. Some people might be able to do that regularly, but I just slept for about 7.5 hours in total, with one wake up in between. I missed all of the stands and Chinese airspace, woke up just about over Seoul. So that's fantastic on a really long flight like this. It just makes it feel that much shorter. should also mention breakfast, which was rather nice too. It included my favorite Swedish muesli from the good folks at Saltokvarn. Some have wondered if this new seat would hold up over longer flights, and I would say it most certainly does. If I have to fly an extra 4 hours to get to Tokyo now, I'm very glad if I can do it in this seat. Anyway, we've started descent now. We're somewhere between Osaka and Tokyo, about half an hour left to run. So let's see what there is to see on this descent on what looks to be a nice sunny day in Japan.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to remind you that there are restrictions on import of plant and animal products in Japan.
Ja hyvät naiset herrat, tässä oli kapteeni. Olemme tässä lähestymässä Tokyo Hanedan lentoasemaa ja ne lentoaikaa jäljellä noin 20 minuuttia, eli perillä ollaan 10 iltapäivä 2 paikallista aikaa. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain here, we are approaching Tokyo Haneda airport, expect to land in about 20 minutes, that's 10 minutes past 2 p.m. local time. And weather in Tokyo at the moment is nice, partly cloudy skies, temperature plus 17 degrees Celsius.
Did you know Finnair has only just recently launched flights to Tokyo's more convenient Haneda airport? They're actually still flying to Narita as well, but only on some days of the week. Finnair's experience doing polar routings goes back to 1983, when the airline became the first in Europe to fly to Japan non-stop via the North Pole. They did that back in those days on the DC-10, avoiding USSR airspace. And now, on some of these flights, they're back at it, especially on the route home. Of course, we wouldn't want you to miss out on everything that goes into a flight like that. So next week, we're going to be riding with the flight crew on the polar route back from Tokyo. You're not going to want to miss that, so be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already.
Cabin crew, please up the doors and cross-check.
Back in Japan after almost 3 years being kept out of this place. And you may not know this, but I spent the first 9 years of my life basically living in Japan, up in the north where I'm headed now. So not being able to come back here for the past few years has been definitely a challenge, something to cope with mentally. I'm used to coming here all the time. It's one of the things that spurred my interest in using frequent flyer miles, finding ways to fly comfortably for free or for cheap, just because I wanted to be able to come to Japan as much as possible, and it was far away and it was expensive. So that was a really long flight on Finnair, but that seat is so great for sleeping. I passed out for roughly 8 hours. I really can't complain with that. And unfortunately, I need to end it here because this super old school Tokyo monorail is gonna arrive in a second. I need to put my mask back on because not having it on is kind of not okay at the moment in Japan still. So in any case, hope you enjoyed the flight, and we'll be back next week in the flight deck for the polar route going back to Helsinki. In Tokyo, for Flight Radar 24, I'm Gabriel Lee.